The headlines regarding Bill Murray have taken a grim turn, shattering the image we held dear. For ages, he wasn't just an actor. He was Hollywood's favorite weird uncle. We are talking about the icon of deadpan humor, the guy who would randomly crash a karaoke night or steal a fry off your plate, a living urban legend whose unpredictable antics built a cult-like following. That erratic, carefree energy he projected in real life always felt like an extension of his movie characters, cementing his status as one of the few A-listers who was not just respected for his craft, but genuinely loved for his vibe. However, beneath that veneer of lovable unpredictability and charming chaos hides a shadow that industry insiders have been side-eyeing for years. It turns out the line between quirky and creepy is thinner than we thought, and Hollywood is finally talking about it. Recent events have stripped away the nostalgia, forcing us to look at the man, not the myth. We are witnessing the dismantling of a legend, as his rebel status is re-examined through a much harsher lens. A longtime Hollywood producer admitted that Murray's larger-than-life folklore acted as a shield, effectively blinding the public to the reality of who he was on set. The charm was a very effective distraction. Those viral moments where he's tending bar in Brooklyn or crashing a wedding, they served as a perfect smokescreen for toxic behavior patterns that colleagues have quietly tolerated for decades. But now, as fresh accusations pile up and buried anecdotes are dragged back into the light, the narrative is flipping. The Bill Murray experience isn't looking so fun anymore. We are witnessing a massive cultural shift where the industry is finally drawing a hard line in the sand between artistic genius and unacceptable conduct, and Murray's pass has officially expired. In this episode of Legacy Unmasked, we are peeling back the layers on the disturbing reports surfacing in 2025. We're going to separate rumor from fact regarding these serious allegations and ask the hard question. Did we ever really know Bill Murray, or did we just fall in love with the character he was playing? One complaint from a female staffer was enough to torpedo a movie budget worth $35 million. Murray tried to brush it off as a jest that didn't land, claiming the behavior was just a joke. But the woman who walked away with a six-figure payout certainly wasn't laughing. Reports are flooding in that Bill Murray has been flagged for gross misconduct on the set of a project titled Being Mortal. This is the scandal that brought an entire production to its knees. Flashback to April 2022. The set of Being Mortal, a high-profile drama directed by Aziz Ansari and co-starring Seth Rogen, went dark overnight. What was supposed to be an Oscar contender adaptation of Surgeon Adol, Gawande's bestseller instantly morphed into a PR nightmare when a female production staffer filed a formal grievance regarding Murray's actions on set. While the studio initially tried to keep a lid on the specific details, investigative reports eventually broke the silence, leaking the disturbing truth to the public. Sources corroborated by People magazine and other major outlets revealed that Murray allegedly pinned down a much younger female production assistant. He reportedly tried to kiss her through their COVID masks and used his body weight to trap her actions that crossed every professional boundary imaginable. The response from the production house, Searchlight Pictures, which operates under the Disney umbrella, was swift. They pulled the plug, immediately launching an internal probe. Even with millions already spent and a star-studded cast, the studio refused to restart the cameras. 3 years later, the film is effectively dead in the water, a silent monument to the severity of the accusation. It was canceled without so much as a press release. It is absolutely unheard of for a major studio to flush a project of that magnitude down the drain over a personnel issue, according to top entertainment attorneys. The sheer amount of money lost signals that this was not a minor misunderstanding. Corporations do not walk away from a $35 million investment unless the liability is catastrophic and the evidence is undeniable. To make the legal problem disappear, Murray reportedly paid out a settlement hovering around $100,000 a number that speaks volumes about the validity of her claim. Naturally, this payment came with a strict non-disclosure agreement, effectively buying the victim's silence and preventing a messy public trial that would reveal further details. This is where the heartbreak lies for fans. The incident completely contradicts the cool guy persona Murray has spent a lifetime crafting. The man famous for spontaneous joy for offering relationship advice to strangers at bachelor parties or joining a random kickball game in the park was revealed to be capable of making a coworker feel unsafe. He crossed lines that left a young professional feeling so violated she was willing to jeopardize her own career to blow the whistle. You cannot ignore the massive imbalance of power here, notes a workplace harassment specialist familiar with Hollywood dynamics. Murray is a titan of the industry. He is untouchable to most. For a production assistant to stand up to a giant like him took immense bravery, suggesting the ordeal was terrifying enough to outweigh the risk of being blacklisted. The Being Mortal production shutdown wasn't just another headline. It was the incident that finally pierced the Teflon armor of a Hollywood legend. It marks a definitive point of no return in how the public views Bill Murray's legacy. We reached a critical juncture where behavior once shrugged off as just Bill being eccentric could no longer be disentangled from the serious conversations we're having about power dynamics, consent, and safety in the workplace. Murray immediately retreated to the oldest excuse in the book. It was just a joke. It is the exact same shield wielded by countless powerful men when they are caught trampling over personal boundaries. However, digging deeper into his own statements uncovers a far more unsettling reality. He admits he has done this before, yet he seems genuinely incapable of understanding why it is now considered unacceptable. He characterized the event as merely a difference of opinion with a woman I'm working with, significantly downplaying the severity of the confrontation. He essentially stated, "I did something I thought was comedic and it didn't land." But then we have to look at his later commentary. In a January 2025 interview with The Guardian, originally meant to generate hype for a new movie, Murray decided to open up about the Being Mortal disaster nearly 3 years after the fact. But instead of putting the controversy to rest, his comments did the opposite. Rather than diffusing the tension, he managed to ignite a fresh wave of scrutiny regarding his complete inability to grasp appropriate professional conduct. "I feel sort of barbecued by the whole thing," Murray complained, attempting to frame himself as the casualty of an overly sensitive era rather than a man who had violated a female colleague's space. He insisted, "It was something I thought was funny." He continued to justify himself, claiming, "I meant it as a joke, but it wasn't taken that way." Most disturbingly, Murray confessed that this wasn't a one-time slip-up, but part of a long-standing modus operandi. He admitted, "I've done this kind of thing before, in a way I thought was funny, and it used to get laughs." This admission effectively stripped away the lovable genius persona, suggesting Murray has engaged in this type of predatory behavior for his entire career. For decades, he was insulated by an industry culture that not only ignored, but actively celebrated these boundary-crossing actions as harmless quirks of a star. While Murray offered some vague expressions of regret, noting, "It still bothers me," and conceding that times have changed his perspective, remained selfish. His framing of the entire saga exposed a fundamental disconnection from the gravity of workplace harassment and the trauma it causes. By centering the narrative on his own feelings of being barbecued and stressing his humorous intent, Murray showcased a chilling lack of empathy. He seemed entirely unconcerned with the woman who felt so unsafe and violated that she had no choice but to file a formal complaint against a movie star. Cultural critics who analyze the Me Too movement in Hollywood note that Murray's reaction follows a tedious and familiar script used by idols facing accountability. It is a strategy of partial acknowledgement. He admits something happened, but couples it with language that subtly shifts the blame onto changing social standards, rather than accepting that the behavior was always wrong. The fact that he emphasizes his own discomfort and reputation damage, rather than the impact on the victim, tells you everything you need to know about his mindset. The interview laid bare Murray's apparent belief that his good intentions should matter more than the actual harm he inflicted on a subordinate. This is a perspective that workplace safety experts identify as the single biggest barrier to meaningful change and accountability in the industry. By focusing on what he meant to do, rather than how his actions affected others, Murray embodies the exact toxic mindset that allows harassment to fester in professional environments. When someone says, "I meant it as a joke," after engaging in unwanted physical contact, they are revealing a total failure to understand the concept of consent, explained a leading harassment prevention consultant. Humor is a shared experience that requires willingness from all parties involved. Using the "it was just a joke" defense proves that the person hasn't fully grasped why their behavior was problematic, aggressive, or creepy in the first place. It is also worth noting that Murray's extensive comments lacked a single specific genuine apology to the woman he targeted. Instead, he framed the incident entirely around the consequences to his career and his own emotional turmoil. This glaring absence speaks volumes about his perspective. He views himself as the wronged party, despite having to pay a massive financial settlement to the actual victim. The interview could have been a moment of redemption. It was an opportunity for genuine accountability and growth, as noted by several cultural critics following the story. Instead, it reinforced the growing fear that Murray still doesn't understand the impact of his actions or the power imbalance that made his joke a nightmare for someone else. And when someone like Scarlett Johansson hints that something was wrong, all of Hollywood pays attention. Her carefully chosen words about her time with Murray suggest an industry-wide reckoning is finally catching up with a man whose behavior was excused for far too long. Looking back at archival footage, you can hear the hesitation. "So excited to work with him," she would say. But then the tone shifts. And, I think it was hard because it was such a strange dynamic. The entertainment industry's reaction to the Murray allegations has been a mix of stunned silence and knowing nods. We are seeing a combination of PR-safe public statements and candid private whispers, confirming that insiders have known about these dark patterns for years. Perhaps the most telling signals come from his former co-stars like Scarlett Johansson. Her experience opposite Murray and Sofia Coppola's acclaimed Lost in Translation is now being re-examined under a much harsher light. If you want to keep uncovering the truth behind Hollywood's biggest icons, make sure to subscribe to Legacy Unmasked. During a revealing profile piece for Vanity Fair in March of 2025, Scarlett Johansson finally broke her silence regarding the chaotic Being Mortal production shutdown. She navigated the topic with extreme caution, selecting every phrase with precision, yet her diplomatic approach failed to mask the sheer gravity of what had transpired on that set. Her sentiment was clear: the events were genuinely disturbing. As she put it, Bill was forced to confront some incredibly uncomfortable realities about himself. She noted that the experience had been a humbling one for the veteran actor, a slice of humble pie that was, in her view, absolutely essential. Coming from a heavyweight like Johansson, who typically avoids airing dirty laundry or critiquing fellow stars in the press, these words landed with the impact of a sledgehammer. While she kept it professional, other figures from Murray's past have been far less restrained, at least when the microphones are off, choosing to be blunt in hushed private discussions, even if they remain hesitant to attach their names to official quotes for fear of immediate backlash. One prominent talent agent representing multiple stars who have shared the screen with Murray admitted that the entire town is on edge watching this drama unfold with bated breath. Every PR team is currently running the numbers, trying to figure out the safest play. Do they stand by a legend, cut ties completely to save face, or just keep their mouths shut and hope the storm passes? Behind closed doors, however, the consensus among Hollywood veterans is that this reckoning is arguably overdue. Even directors who have collaborated with him for years find themselves torn, struggling to reconcile the icon with the man. A few loyalists still champion his artistic genius, but a growing number are finally admitting that his on-set antics often created a toxic environment that was nearly impossible to manage. Even Wes Anderson, perhaps Murray's most frequent collaborator, had to walk a tightrope when speaking to The New Yorker, offering a statement so carefully constructed it felt like a legal defense. He acknowledged Murray's undeniable one-of-a-kind magic on screen, but conceded that capturing that magic often comes with a heavy price tag in terms of on-set harmony. Anderson hinted at the turbulence, admitting there were specific difficult episodes he had to personally smooth over to keep productions from falling apart. An entertainment journalist specializing in the dark underbelly of Hollywood workplace dynamics pointed out that the industry's reaction, or lack thereof, is the real story here. Usually when a legend is under fire, you see a wave of support, but the deafening silence here is screaming louder than any press release ever could. We aren't seeing the typical parade of co-stars lining up to tweet, "That's not the man I know." That defense squad is noticeably missing in action. That void suggests a disturbing truth: countless people have likely endured questionable behavior from Murray, but never felt safe enough or powerful enough to voice their grievances until now. But if you really want to know which way the wind is blowing, look at the leaked reports from insiders regarding his plummeting status within the studio system. Multiple moles have confirmed that scripts written with Murray in mind are being quietly rewritten, with roles being retooled for other actors without a word to the press. Of course, no studio will admit it's because of the scandal, but you don't need a crystal ball to see that the timing is far too convenient. It's clear that executives are recalculating the liability of ensuring an actor whose unpredictable conduct has shifted from quirky to dangerous. One veteran producer, speaking on condition of anonymity, described it perfectly as the Bill Murray tax. You secured a legendary performance, sure, but the cost was high, the erratic outbursts, the nightmare of contacting him via a 1-800 number since he has no agent, and constant friction with the crew. For 30 or 40 years, Hollywood decided that the juice was worth the squeeze, that the box office returns justified the headaches. But now the math has changed. The tax has become too expensive, especially as the public learns exactly what they are paying for. This shift mirrors a larger cultural pivot where the tortured genius excuse no longer flies, and behavior once laughed off as artistic temperament is finally being labeled as toxic abuse. Murray's situation is arguably the most difficult test case for this new era, precisely because he is so universally adored, protected by decades of urban legends that framed him as a lovable rogue rather than a liability. A professor of media studies noted that Tinseltown is still writing the playbook on how to dismantle the pedestals of its living legends without toppling the whole system. The problem is that Murray isn't just fighting fires regarding what happened last week or last month. He is facing a forensic audit of his entire career, where actions once seen as charming rebellion are now being recontextualized as serious boundary violations. This is a far stickier situation than many previous controversies. And then the viral footage dropped, shattering the illusion for millions of fans instantly. We saw him aggressively cornering a patron at a theater, and later an uncomfortable moment involving Naomi Watts on live TV that left viewers cringing. These weren't just bad days. They were cracks in the mask revealing behavior that insiders have normalized and ignored for half a century. And folks, it didn't stop there. We are talking about 4 separate viral disasters in 2025 alone. Just as the dust was settling on the Being Mortal fiasco, 2 fresh scandals erupted in early 2025, dragging Murray back into the headlines and wreaking havoc on his already crumbling reputation. The first domino to fall happened right in the middle of a Broadway showing of Death of a Salesman back in February of 2025. Bystanders and leaked cell phone clips caught Murray losing his cool, targeting a fellow audience member who was supposedly snapping pictures against the theater's rules. Instead of flagging down an usher like a normal person, Murray decided to take matters into his own hands, confronting the man. During the intermission, things went from 0 to 100, instantly turning into a scene that witnesses described as terrifyingly aggressive. One witness whose TikTok breakdown of the fight blew up online noted that this wasn't a polite request to put the phone away. Murray was physically towering over the guy, screaming profanities, and making wild gestures that actually forced security to sprint over to prevent a brawl. It was like watching a man who truly believes he is a god among mortals, completely exempt from the basic rules of decency. That Broadway blow-up might have been swept under the rug as just Bill being Bill, if not for the absolute train wreck that occurred just 3 weeks later on The Tonight Show. While at the show to promote his comeback film, his first since the scandal, Murray crossed paths with Naomi Watts backstage, and the encounter quickly turned sour. Later, when the 2 stars were ushered onto the stage for what was supposed to be a spontaneous bit of banter, things took a sharp turn. Without warning, Murray grabbed Watts and forced a kiss right on her mouth, a cringeworthy spectacle caught in high definition from every possible camera angle. The footage was merciless, capturing the exact second the boundaries were crossed for the entire world to see. You could see the shock on her face, followed by that strained, uncomfortable laughter we all recognize as a defense mechanism. While she handled the ambush with total professionalism, refusing to make a scene on live TV experts in body language, and cultural critics pointed out that she was clearly recoiling in distress. Watts eventually touched on the creepy encounter in a subtle Instagram post stating, "Some interactions are best left in the rearview mirror." She added a crucial reminder for her followers: consent matters, always, everywhere, and with absolutely everyone. A psychologist specializing in boundary violations noted that the audacity of these moments is what makes them so damning. Murray knew the world was watching. It suggests a disturbing disconnect. Either he is completely oblivious to how his actions come across, or he truly believes his A-list status acts as a get-out-of-jail-free card for basic social decency. Both possibilities are alarming, especially considering the mountain of allegations that have been piling up against him. The timing here is what really raises eyebrows. This public display happened right on the heels of the massive being mortal settlement news hitting the headlines. It forces us to ask if Murray actually grasped the gravity of those earlier accusations, or if he simply threw money at the problem to make it go away. Instead of stepping back and respecting boundaries, it looked like business as usual, continuing the very specific pattern of behavior that had already cost him a movie and a fortune. A cultural critic pointed out that these incidents are the smoking gun linking the Murray myth to the dark reality. These moments bridge the gap between the quirky public persona we see on talk shows and the troubling private behavior whispered about in industry circles. For decades, fans brushed off stories of his on-set tyranny as just exaggerated gossip because it didn't fit the narrative of the lovable, spontaneous cultural icon. But now we are watching that toxic behavior unfold in real time on the red carpet, making it impossible to separate the man from the monster. The mask is slipping, and the public is finding it increasingly difficult to maintain that separation between the art and the artist. These viral clips have triggered a massive vibe shift regarding Murray contributing to a rapid decline in his public approval rating. Data from social media platforms reveals a nosedive in positive sentiment, with diehard fans expressing regret and deep disillusionment with their former hero. The hashtag #BillMurrayIsOverParty even started trending briefly after the Watts fiasco, marking a distinct cultural pivot. It signaled a turning point for a performer who had previously enjoyed a Teflon-like immunity from serious criticism for most of his career. As one analyst put it, we are witnessing the collapse of the eccentric genius defense that has shielded him for so long. For 40 years, Murray coasted on the public's willingness to interpret his boundary crossing as charming quirks rather than what they actually were. He benefited from a culture that was all too ready to frame unpredictability as charisma rather than viewing it as a violation of personal space. However, viewing these recent public stunts through the lens of the serious being mortal allegations forces us to rewrite that entire history. It turns out Hollywood's worst-kept secret is finally out in the open. Bill Murray has allegedly been terrorizing film sets for decades. From physical intimidation to deep emotional manipulation, the stories reveal a man who weaponized his power to bully colleagues, while the studio system conveniently looked the other way. Even when approached by interviewers, the disconnect is palpable. While fans express excitement oblivious to the drama, the narrative shifts sharply. We have to look at Chapter 5, his notorious reputation for on-set toxicity that has plagued his career. The current storm of controversy has cracked the vault on his 40-year history of difficult behavior on film productions. Incidents that were once laughed off as classic Bill stories are now being recognized as pieces of a disturbing, abusive pattern. From his breakout days on Saturday Night Live, right up to his latest projects, Murray has left a wake of burned bridges. He left a trail of conflicts that the entertainment industry largely excused, minimized, or ignored until the dam finally broke. Perhaps the most heartbreaking example is the destruction of his relationship with director Harold Ramis, the genius behind Caddyshack, Ghostbusters, and Groundhog Day. Their legendary partnership imploded during the filming of Groundhog Day, severing their friendship for over 20 years. Ramis later revealed that Murray became irrationally cruel and totally unreachable during the shoot, effectively icing out his best friend. Ramis described a nightmare scenario, explosive tantrums, the silent treatment, and an environment so toxic it felt like a war zone. It got so bad that the director actually had to hire a bodyguard just to mediate their interactions safely, a tragic state of affairs for a comedy set. Before his passing in 2014, Ramis told The New Yorker, "We never really patched it up, admitting the wound never fully healed. Although they had a brief reconciliation right at the end, the fact that two best friends didn't speak for 2 decades speaks volumes. The depth of that rift is a testament to the severity of Murray's behavior and the emotional toll it took on those closest to him." Then there is Richard Dreyfuss, who co-starred with Murray in the 1991 hit What About Bob, who has been incredibly vocal about the nightmare he endured. Dreyfuss recounted a terrifying moment where Murray hurled a heavy glass ashtray at his head during an argument, missing his face by mere inches. Dreyfuss didn't mince words in a 2019 interview, calling him a drunken bully and recalling how Murray screamed right in his face, "I don't like you. I absolutely despise the way you interact with other human beings." That was the sentiment to which I retorted, "Well, isn't that fascinating, because I can't stand you and I certainly don't care for how you bully people either." According to the account from Richard Dreyfuss, the situation escalated instantly. Murray allegedly grabbed a heavy glass ashtray and hurled it violently toward his co-star's face. Actress Lucy Liu has also opened up about a volatile showdown with Murray on the set of Charlie's Angels, where he reportedly singled her out, unleashing a barrage of language that was both inexcusable and deeply offensive. During a candid conversation on the Los Angeles Times podcast Asian Enough back in 2021, Liu disclosed that Murray started hurling insults at her simply because a scene had been rewritten without his knowledge. Liu refused to be intimidated and stood her ground right then and there, a brave decision that she looks back on without a single ounce of regret today. However, this specific altercation shines a spotlight on Murray's reputed habit of selecting specific colleagues to humiliate in front of the entire crew. Filmmaker P.J. Hogan revealed his own nightmare while directing Murray in the 1997 classic My Best Friend's Wedding, painting a picture of a man impossible to manage. Hogan described how the actor would force him to wait hours before finally reporting to the wardrobe department, and once he actually arrived, he bizarrely demanded that the costume assistant be fired on the spot for absolutely no logical reason. These harrowing anecdotes represent merely the tip of the iceberg regarding the actor's behavior. They are just a few drops in a bucket of reported controversies that have trailed Murray throughout his decades-long run in Hollywood. When viewed together, these stories expose a troubling pattern of conduct that far exceeds the typical eccentricity or perfectionism that the public often forgives in creative geniuses. On the contrary, the evidence points to a powerful figure who has habitually weaponized his status to foster toxic work environments, all while facing virtually no repercussions for his actions. What is perhaps most shocking about the Murray saga is the sheer length of time this behavior was allowed to continue without him suffering any real career damage. This observation comes from an entertainment industry analyst specializing in Hollywood workplace dynamics, noting the lack of significant professional fallout for years. For the longest time, these outbursts were dismissed with a shrug as just Bill being Bill, rather than being labeled as what they were: workplace harassment and bullying. That convenient narrative acted as a shield protecting him from the severe consequences that any actor with less box office appeal would have undoubtedly faced for identical misconduct. This modern re-examination of Murray's on-set volatility forces us to ask critical questions about where the industry draws the line between demanding artistic process and actual abuse. For decades, Murray's aggression was swept under the rug, rationalized as part of a long tradition of difficult geniuses. The industry operated on the belief that their creative output was valuable enough to justify ignoring the destruction they left in their wake. Hollywood is finally beginning to calculate the true human cost of that tolerance, noted one veteran producer with years of experience in the field. One has to wonder how many talented performers quit the industry entirely due to toxic stars. How many artistic visions were shattered just to cater to one man's ego? The ripple effects of these power dynamics reach far deeper and wider than the specific scandals that have actually made it to the headlines. While Murray's quirky public persona was busy charming audiences across America, women working behind the scenes in Hollywood were navigating a much darker reality. Fresh allegations act as puzzle pieces, revealing a systemic design of unwanted advances, crude remarks, and a total failure to respect professional boundaries, particularly regarding younger women. I had a difference of opinion with a woman I'm working with, Murray stated in a vague attempt to explain the situation. I did something I thought was funny, and it wasn't taken that way, he added, minimizing the severity of the interaction. Section 6 examines the pattern specifically inappropriate behavior directed toward women. As the entertainment world takes a hard look at Murray's legacy, a disturbing theme has crystallized from the mounting allegations suggesting a predatory nature to his conduct. The evidence suggests that his misconduct has disproportionately targeted women, specifically those who hold less leverage and lower status within the Hollywood hierarchy. This behavioral trend goes well beyond the production shutdown of Being Mortal, or the recent reports of an uninvited kiss involving Naomi Watts. Multiple industry insiders claim that Murray possesses a decades-long history of making skin-crawling comments. The reports detail him initiating physical contact without consent and manufacturing situations where the line between professional and personal is intentionally blurred, mostly with female subordinates. There is a reason the complaints from the Being Mortal set struck such a nerve with so many women in this town, explained a casting director familiar with Murray's productions. It wasn't viewed as a random one-off mistake. It was seen as validation for behavior that countless women had endured or watched happen, yet never felt safe enough to report officially. That sentiment suggests a reservoir of silent victims who are only now seeing their experiences acknowledged. Gina Davis, who co-starred with Murray in the 1990 crime comedy Quick Change, detailed a traumatic encounter that occurred the very first time she met him. In her memoir released in 2022, titled Dying of Politeness, Davis recounts a disturbing scene in a hotel suite. She describes Murray relentlessly insisting on using a massage device known as the thumper on her back, despite her saying no over and over again. "I said no," she recalled. "I refused multiple times, but he simply wouldn't stop," Davis wrote, highlighting his refusal to accept her boundaries. She went on to describe a moment during their first joint television appearance to promote the movie where Murray pulled down the strap of her dress, humiliating her on a national broadcast. These specific incidents mirror a specific recurring dynamic found in nearly all the horror stories surrounding Murray. They depict interactions where a woman's clearly stated boundaries are either completely ignored or treated as a negotiation, establishing a frightening power imbalance in the workplace. What becomes undeniably clear from these testimonies is a consistent behavioral loop, noted a researcher specializing in gender studies within media. It is a pattern that specifically invalidates women's bodily autonomy and professional agency, underscoring why channels like Legacy Unmasked continue to investigate these stories. The strategic, "it was just a joke" defense that Murray relies on effectively trivializes the severity of unwanted physical contact. It acts as a form of gaslighting, shifting the entire burden onto the women, forcing them to accept predatory behavior as harmless fun rather than calling it out for what it is inappropriate and violating. Numerous women who have worked in support capacities ranging from production assistants to makeup artists and other crew members on Murray's sets have quietly come forward with anonymous testimonies regarding uncomfortable encounters. However, the vast majority remain terrified to attach their real names to these allegations, fearing their careers will be destroyed before they even begin. These testimonies reveal a disturbing and repetitive pattern of operation. Murray consistently leverages his immense status to engineer scenarios where rejecting his physical advances or speaking up against his remarks would mean verbally disciplining a Hollywood icon. For a young professional in a junior role, that is a terrifying and risky gamble. According to workplace harassment specialists, this massive power imbalance is the key to decoding these interactions. When a figure with Murray's legendary clout initiates non-consensual touch or makes lewd, remarks the victim is trapped in a lose-lose situation, either endure the violation and potentially invite further boundary crossing, or push back and risk being branded as difficult, uptight, or unable to take a joke. In the entertainment industry, those labels can be effectively a death sentence for a woman's professional future. Addressing this specific pattern of misconduct has proven exceptionally challenging because it thrives in the gray zones that Hollywood has historically refused to police. By framing these actions as spontaneous wit, friendly bonding, or eccentric moments of connection, he creates a shield of plausible deniability. This allows him to claim innocence while leaving the recipients feeling deeply violated and cementing a toxic dynamic on set. As one cultural critic observed, the Murray situation highlights how certain behaviors can be celebrated and predatory simultaneously. The very traits that define his beloved public brand, his chaotic spontaneity, unpredictability, and total disregard for social norms take on a sinister quality when they manifest as unwanted touching or a refusal to hear the word no. As the film industry is forced to reckon with these unsettling revelations, the conversation is moving beyond isolated incidents to look at the systemic machinery that enables them. This wider view of the situation suggests that fixing the Murray problem requires more than just punishing specific acts. It demands a foundational overhaul of how power, consent, and professional lines are drawn in creative environments. For decades, Murray has famously worked without an agent or manager, making him virtually unreachable and seemingly untouchable. However, industry insiders are now pulling back the curtain, revealing that this wasn't just a quirk. It was a calculated tactic designed to insulate him from the consequences of his problematic behavior. He once reminisced about the old days, claiming, "There was a time when my agent wouldn't let me take a job because the pay was too low, or he'd block me from working with a specific director for some stupid reason." Section 7, the No Agent Firewall, a masterclass in avoiding accountability. One of the most defining features of Murray's mythos has been his refusal to employ a standard team of agents, managers, or publicists, a choice that the media has always painted as charmingly independent, but is now being re-examined as a strategic maneuver to limit his liability. Since the 1990s, Murray has run his business with nothing but a lawyer and a toll-free 1-800 number that he barely checks for messages regarding potential scripts. This chaotic arrangement created a reality where even A-list directors desperate to cast him had to jump through hoops just to make contact, spawning legendary tales of filmmakers like Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola effectively stalking him to get a response. This rogue actor approach was sold as Murray's punk rock rebellion against the Hollywood machine, according to entertainment analysts. But in practice, it functioned as high-grade armor against the professional repercussions that other actors face. With no representatives to manage his relationships with the studios, there was no official pipeline for reporting abuse or enforcing standard workplace conduct. Sources within the industry now indicate that this setup served a specific utility far darker than a simple desire for artistic freedom. Without an agent or manager who is beholden to industry relationships and responsible for protecting their clients, Image Murray effectively dismantled the feedback loop. There was no one to call, no one to complain to, and no mechanism to address the behavior. Agents and managers do more than just sign contracts. They manage human relationships, explained a veteran talent agent. They are the designated channel for studios to communicate concerns about on-set meltdowns or harassment. They have a direct financial motivation to ensure their clients stay employable and maintain a good reputation. By removing that layer of oversight, Murray engineered a world where there was literally no one paid to tell him he had crossed a line or to explain the damage he was causing. This complete absence of professional representation created a vacuum of accountability. Look out for more deep dives on our channel Legacy Unmasked. This unorthodox representation strategy did more than just annoy executives. It completely dismantled the industry's standard protocols for dealing with misconduct and problematic behavior on set. In the normal Hollywood ecosystem, studios address grievances by contacting a performer's team agents and managers who have both the direct access and the financial incentive to rein in their client. However, Murray's unique arrangement effectively severed this critical line of communication, leaving no middleman to mediate. This left production companies with virtually no leverage for discipline, forcing them to choose between silently tolerating the behavior or taking the nuclear option of firing him altogether. One production executive who worked with him remarked that the infamous 1-800 number was more than just a quirky eccentricity. It was a formidable wall designed to block accountability. The dilemma was simple but paralyzing. If he acted inappropriately on a Monday, who exactly were you supposed to call on Tuesday to fix it? There was no weary manager to step in, pull him aside, and firmly say, "This behavior is unacceptable, and it needs to stop right now." He had no agent worried about collateral damage to other clients. He only had an attorney whose sole job was to provide legal shielding rather than foster a healthy professional environment. This systematic evasion of responsibility takes on a much darker tone when we look at the broader context of his career. It becomes especially concerning given Murray's own admission that the incident on the set of Being Mortal was not the first time he had engaged in that specific type of conduct. In fact, he admitted that in previous instances, he simply dismissed his actions as hilarious, completely missing the gravity of the situation. Without a dedicated team to safeguard his reputation or check his impulses, Murray lived in a bubble of unaccountability that likely permitted these toxic patterns to fester unchecked for decades. The reality is that the vast majority of actors rely heavily on their support staff for more than just reading scripts. A manager representing several A-list stars noted that these representatives provide crucial course correction and professional guidance that keeps a career on track. They are the essential reality check, the ones who warn you, "That comment was offensive." Or, "The producers are saying you were difficult to work with yesterday." When you strip away those critical voices, it becomes terrifyingly easy to develop massive blind spots regarding how your behavior actually impacts the people around you. As Hollywood finally reckons with Murray's history, his unconventional business model is being reevaluated under a harsh investigative light. What was once viewed as charming rebellion is now seen by many as a deliberate mechanism to bypass standard professional checks and balances. It appears to have been a system that conveniently shielded him from the kind of consequences that might have corrected this problematic behavior